The one-page memorandum sent by Washington put Iran face to face with the loss that Tehran feared the most. Hand over the enriched uranium, freeze nuclear progress, and give up the card the regime used to threaten the Gulf. This Thursday, May 7, 2026, the United States is not just discussing the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz or the temporary end of the bombings. The demand now reaches the core of Iranian power. Trump agrees to ease some of the pressure, allow 30 days of negotiations, and let trade breathe again. But he demands that Iran stop moving nuclear material, accept a moratorium on enrichment, and even remove enriched uranium from within its own nation. For Tehran, this is not a technical detail, it's the destruction of the main political weapon that kept the regime afloat. I'll tell you all about this in a moment, but right now you'll want to be subscribed to the channel to stay well informed. Follow along in real time with the best journalism you've seen and the credibility Milson Alves is known for. The suspension of Project Liberty, which seemed like a momentary victory for Iran, ended up revealing a bigger trap. Saudi Arabia refused the use of the Prince Sultan Air Base and Saudi airspace, blocking the American operation that intended to escort ships and reopen Hormuz. The Iranian regime tried to sell this pause as a sign of Washington's weakness, but behind the scenes, the United States changed its target. Instead of relying only on bases in the Gulf, they began to put direct pressure on the Iranian nuclear program. It was at this point that the crisis turned against Tehran. Iran wanted to discuss maritime routes, sanctions, and economic relief. Trump put on the table exactly the one thing the regime couldn't achieve: not losing its ability to use enriched uranium as a life insurance policy. The Saudi refusal came after Trump announced Project Liberty on social media. Without full coordination with Gulf allies, the Saudi concern was straightforward. If the United States used Saudi territory to reopen Hormuz by force, Saudi Arabia could become a target for Iranian missiles, drones, and sabotage. Tehran knows this and has always exploited that fear. The regime doesn't need to defeat the American Navy to create pressure. It's enough to convince Gulf governments that any open support for Washington could come at a high price. But this pause didn't get Trump out of the crisis. On the contrary, it pushed the White House onto an even tougher path. The Liberty Project targeted the sea. The memorandum targets the heart of the regime. The naval operation could escort cargo ships, protect oil tankers, and reduce the blockade in Hormuz. But the nuclear demand could destroy the leverage Tehran has built over the years. Without enriched uranium, without the freedom to enrich, without underground facilities operating out of control, and without room to hide equipment, Iran loses the tool it used to tell the world that it could still cross a dangerous line whenever it wanted. The Wall Street Journal reported the toughest version of the American demands. In this proposal, Iran would have to accept a 20-year ban on nuclear enrichment and hand over all enriched uranium. Publicly declare that it is not seeking nuclear weapons, dismantle Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, end underground nuclear work, accept inspections on demand, and face penalties if it violates the agreement. The Axios version is shorter, but it also makes the same point. According to this version, the White House believes it is close to a memorandum of understanding, a one-page document to end the war and open a more detailed negotiation phase. And the United States would agree to ease sanctions, release billions of dollars in frozen Iranian funds, and allow the resumption of transit through the Strait of Hormuz. This initial agreement would open a 30-day window for a broader pact. The risk is clear. Tehran may try to use these 30 days to catch its breath, reorganize its routes, and ask for new extensions. The most explosive detail of this version is the possible removal of enriched uranium from inside Iran. The regime has already stated several times that it would not agree to hand over this material, and that's exactly why this demand carries so much weight. Enriched uranium is not just a technical item, it is the physical proof of Iran's ability to keep the world on alert. The New York Post brought up another sign of confusion in the talks. Pakistani mediators said that there are several versions of the document circulating. This shows that the agreement isn't ready yet. It's not clear whether the differences come from the United States, Iran, or the intermediaries who are trying to work out a solution. Pakistan serves as an intermediary because direct talks remain stalled. Trump also reportedly said that it's still too early to send negotiators to Islamabad for face-to-face meetings. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner would continue working by phone and through indirect channels. The distance shows distrust. Washington doesn't know if an Iranian faction that accepts a text will have the strength to force another faction to go along with that internal split. It's one of Iran's major problems. The government may talk about negotiation, but the Revolutionary Guard operates as the hardline core of the war effort. One faction may accept the memorandum to save the economy, while another may reject any removal of uranium, seeing it as a humiliation. Meanwhile, groups allied with the regime continue to exert pressure outside Iran's borders. It was in this environment that attacks took place in Iraq, including against a base with an American presence and against Kurdish forces. Tehran wanted to show that it could still hurt American interests, even during the negotiation phase. Trump responded with a direct threat, according to the statement attributed to him. Iran should deliver what had already been agreed upon. Operation Epic Fury may come to an end and the Strait of Hormuz may be reopened to everyone, including Iran itself. But if Tehran does not accept, the bombings will resume at a higher level and with greater intensity than before. The message was intended for the Iranian leadership, for the Gulf, and for China. Washington does not intend to allow the regime to use negotiations as a tactical pause. While maintaining the same nuclear and regional threat, Iran tries to resist because it still finds loopholes in the blockade. One of the routes mentioned runs along the Iran-Pakistan border, used for smuggling supplies and oil. This passage helps Tehran buy time and prolong its economic survival, but it doesn't solve the bigger problem. What it can't easily do is sustain an entire economy under blockade, sanctions, naval pressure, the threat of bombing, and the demand to hand over nuclear material. The Iranian machine is being squeezed from all sides. Al Jazeera showed reports from inside Iran about inflation, an unstable currency, and daily increases in the prices of basic goods. The price of eggs, cars, gold, and the dollar has become a concern on the streets. Shopkeepers say the situation was already bad before the truce and got worse with the uncertainty. Some Iranians say that even if the war ends, the economy could take 10 to 15 years to recover. The Iranian president himself acknowledged the rise in prices and called for action against speculation and hoarding. Another point shows the internal fragility of the regime. Circulating reports claim that internet access has been blocked or severely limited for more than 68 days. Even so, Iranian authorities release messages on networks that most of their own population cannot freely access. This reveals the contradiction of the regime. It speaks outwardly as if it is strong, but controls internal communication because it fears protests. Trump also commented that many Iranians would like to rise up against the regime, but are crushed by internal security forces. The economic crisis, combined with the blockade and the fear of a new war, creates a dangerous environment for Tehran. Examples from other nations reinforce the magnitude of the loss that Tehran is trying to avoid. Libya gave up its weapons of mass destruction program in 2003 and never again had the same power to intimidate the West. Saddam Hussein's Iraq lost military capability, suffered sanctions, became isolated, and ended up vulnerable when its deterrent was no longer credible. North Korea took the opposite path, preserved its nuclear program, and uses this threat to this day as a shield for the regime's survival. Iran is aware of these examples, which is why it resists handing over enriched uranium, accepting inspections on demand, and dismantling underground facilities. But if Iran keeps refusing, Trump's threat is already in place. This is Milson Alves News, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the community. Milson Alves.